we're going to have a brief conversation about the new film from Mao Chenyu, Anti-Rural China. But before we do, Sophie will just say a few words about the project, and we'll introduce our very special guests who we're sitting behind in the audience, to the audience. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's really nice to see you over there in the Shanghai gallery. As you might know or not know, we, the curators of Panzermont Pons, have actually never been in the space. So it's really lovely to welcome the guests today on this last day of the exhibition and this final moment of the public program. I'll keep it really brief, but the two of us have worked as a collaborative curatorial duo for close to 10 years now, under an umbrella of Reassembling the Natural, where we focus on images of nature in both science and culture in exhibition settings across art, science, and philosophy. And the Panzermont Pons exhibition is the last project in this extensive cycle of international iterations. And as a sort of narrative starting point, the concept revolves around the work of Lynn Margulis, an evolutionary biologist from the 20th century, who currently is actually quite popular, a very interesting figure to many people working around issues of nature and biodiversity crisis and so on, climate change, in the interdisciplinary context of art and scientific practice. So in Panzermont Pons, we were able to show and gather 5 artworks, 5 installations, and a film by Mao Laoshi is one of the works there. I Have What, which is an older film. And so for the event today, we are so fortunate to have had the presentation of the new film. So yes, we're excited to relay questions from the audience with you this afternoon, and also our own questions, and look really forward to this conversation with you. Thank you for being there.
And just to add, I will just give a very brief introduction. I'm not sure exactly the configuration of how the screening occurred prior to this moment, but for everyone in the gallery, I assume you're aware that you just saw Anti-Rural China, the premiere, and Mao Laoshi, who is lives and works in Shanghai, was so gracious to not only allow us to show I Have What as part of the exhibition in the space, but to allow us to host the premiere of the film. And thank you for being here and being there, I guess I should say. He is the founder of the experimental social platform Paddy Film Farm in Hunan, which investigates and analyzes rural societies in China, and where he has converted paddy field into a self-sufficient farming system, which nurtures the linguistic and film practices of paddy film. Among the many sadnesses that we had over the course of being stuck in Europe and unable to come work on the exhibition and installation with the team at the ICA in Shanghai, our sadness was most acute, realizing that we would not be able to visit Paddy Film Farm, hopefully in the future. We're also joined by Lu Laoshi, a professor of philosophy at the School of the Humanities at Tongji University, who specializes in contemporary French philosophy, philosophy of the city, and is associated with numerous projects in the Chinese contemporary art arena. Another acute disappointment, not being able to have a philosophical conversation in person, but we'll do our best here. and hopefully the future will afford us the chance to do that in person. And so maybe as an opening question, and something that might connect the visitors to the ICA who have seen the show to the premiere that they were just able to view. I thought maybe if we could start with a question about the relationship between I Have What and anti-rural China within your practice, broadly speaking, as I know you mentioned earlier on that the anti-rural China was in a sense maybe a completion or an extension of I Have What, and so maybe that would be a nice place to start.
这个《庆祥的中国》这个电影呢，就是一直都在强调一个概念，就是我们要对乡村和对中国农村的问题的关注形势的变动。因为我接近20年，不到20年的这种关于农村的电影的制作，包括从12年以来接近10年的农业的实践，就是通过到电影做了10年的文本以后，就是从城市去看待乡村，发现重新去种田也许是一个重新认识中国乡村问题的一个路径之一吧，一个体验的一个不能说现场，一个体验的一个个人在场。所以这10年之后，特别是15年做完关于这个符号的这种电影长片以后，陆陆续续做了一些跟当代视角比较接近的一些展览性的短视频，我们也可以叫它影像作品，但是我认为我都是按照一种电影的视角去重新理解我们的这种关注的形式，就我们说艺术的形式怎么被呈现在对于我们的那种土地啊，对我们那种经验的一种新的可能的扩张上。所以这个电影一直都在强调我自己是要离开那个对于电影的已有的关系，要回到一个从到电影的20几个电影的上下文中间拖出来，进入到一种扩张我们的注意力的一种可能的形式中间去。所以这个电影要的是简洁，就是里面的大量的影像都有互文关系的，就是在到电系列里面都能找到相应的作品，而且有非常好的中英文字幕的对比。为什么不用它？我觉得语言好像特殊的要大家看明白一个准确讲了什么一个句子不是那么太重要，但重要的是我们重新去经验一个这样的一个视觉一个影像投出来的时候，我们重新去理解那个中国乡土的这个现场，无论是我们的这个知识领域的现场，我们所谓的知识的田野，还是我们重新去把所谓的要去建构的，把农村要去建构在我们今天的作为城市的一个主体中间，要被拉入话题的那样的一种建构性的一种行动中间，我们真实的乡村中那种神性在哪里？所以这个电影第一个是强调要扩张我们的注意力，第二个是关于神性。我认为关于神性的讨论在这部电影中间一直都回到了一个手势，我们会不断的看到各种翻转的手势，而我认为那些手势是让我非常着迷的，特别那些古老的巫师，年老的巫师们，他们身体的那种非常看似很笨拙，事实非常轻盈的步伐中间，我能够找到我们重新切入我们理解中国乡土的另外的一种经验的样式。大概是这样，所以我认为《新疆的中国》分成上下部，是因为我要把非常复杂的那种叙述框架的东西，全部要扔到下一个包袱上去，所以这部电影也变成一个很轻的、感受的，可以去让你坐在那里去，可以看也可以不看，但是你要重新去找到你对中国比如说中国乡土、乡村。城市、乡村等等相关命题的一种注意力的形式，要重新被打开，重新要去找到新的注意的样式，这是这个电影的初衷，大概是这样。
Thank you. I mean, one of the questions we had at the very beginning when we received the film was, it appears there are no subtitles this time. So we were both concerned what will we miss, but then it was so hypnotic and so effective that in fact you kind of don't worry about the language. And I'm just curious of the movement from I have what, where there is a more documentary element, to the decision to allow the visual to speak without comment. That's my question for you.
There, listen.
Yeah.
是，之前有2位策展人，还没share。当时我们讨论这个拥有的时候，其实我觉得这个片子是我自己现在想去反的。为什么？因为它过多的陈述发现电影疏解的越来越少。关于中国乡土的问题，就是有一堆包袱丢在那里，我们各样的政治经济学、各样的范本模型都拿出来套用过了，发现都不是什么太合用。就是所以这个时候，我们反而在强调一种，更因为强调一种经验的注意力形式的转换，这中间我们能不能发现点什么其他的东西？这也是我反复在讲的是，我们的田野是要给出的，这个田野的意思是我们的影像的关注是要为我们的注意力的形式的可能性提供一些新的基建的设施的。比如说，这个电影更多要于重新思考我们中国乡土中间的一些思考问题的角度，提供一种可能性的一种怎么说呢？艺术中间的一支啊，这样的概念，就它要为不断在结构化的、不断在被非常的笼统化的这种叙述，打开一种另外的感知形式。
And in that relation, can you tell us a little bit about how you met or got to know the people that are featured in the film, and how you kind of built the relationship with them so that you could actually accompany them with the camera in this way that you did, because it's very intense sometimes.
这些电影中间的人物相处已经达到15年以上了，所以已经不在一个我和他们中间要建立方法，就是电影要去获取方法的这个角度，而是我适度的发现这种方法变得越来越不重要。因为从03年开始关注这个中国的乡土中间，特别是巫术这个话题以来，我们还在找那种比如说机器人和还有包括我们的对象之间的关系。但是经过几年我们的电影工作以后，发现我们的关注对象一直很稳固，包括这个罗戏的第3部分，这个罗戏的这一个团队。2016年上半年，我还把他们请到了上海的当代艺术博物馆，做了一场现场表演。当时陆老师也参加了。这个时候才发现，这种神性是不一样的。在一个现代美术馆的空间里面所展出的那种所谓的中国的罗我神性，它跟空间的非应关系不那么太对。他们一直认为这种关系不对。这个时候我们才发现它的一个精神的样式是跟空间有关系。所以我认为中国的乡土问题中间的电影的第一部分是要解决那些我们失去了双眼、失去了视觉，也能够找到空间定位的那种生命的经验。我认为这种经验，这才是我们说重新去理解我们的乡土的时候，那些我们的身体在脱出这种现代化的或者脱出这种现代装置的这种空间约束之后，能够真实找到一种回味。所以在那个盲人在新的乡土的建设，包括乡村化的过程中间，你会发现大量的古村落的人被从天井、被从四合院这样的空间中间移到非常现代的像传统建筑的那种样式，但是失去了它已有的那种回味的方式。这是所以刚刚您提的那个问题，其实我认为电影拍摄对我们来说距离已经解决掉了，是因为你跟他们就跟自己作为一个在其中的人一样去共同生活。
And was that the case as well in the, let's say, the second site where the construction is happening in this kind of informal market, or was that relationship quite different because the way that the people in the film are responding to the camera seems quite not different, but you're aware of a kind of different presence in the film.
这个罗戏因为是从2006年开始跟这个罗班建立关系，一直拍到2017年，我还在拍摄，所以就是有非常复杂的拍摄的方式。我只是说这个电影我剪一节，一个这样的一个怎么说一个组装的方式里面，正好觉得它是要这样来的。每一次都换视角，这次是以这个老的罗伊斯和那个去世的罗伊斯之间的关系，我认为我还是找了个线索，因为我的材料太杂了。但是整体来说，我觉得在那种身体中间，我一直在寻找那种手势。刚刚我也叙述了，就是说罗物中间存在大量的手势。正像我们今天刚刚两位这种人开场就说过，在气候危机的这种大的这种环境面前，我认为我们要给一些手势出来。无论是怎么猜想的也好，至少你要给出一种可能的东西。这种可能的东西在电影中间，在我们已有的各种可能的组装中间，有那种手势在的。也就是说，就像我们所用的那个行动 effect 出神这种概念一样的。所以电影它有一种这样的动员的能力，它让那种互不相干的，让那种琐碎杂碎的经验中间能够编组成一种网络，这种网络能够很切身的给你一个界面，让你去重新找到链接它的可能的交接的形式。我的意思，这种电影就是一种场景，它让观看是能够不能说陷入场景，而是跟场景中间建立一种经验的连接。所以刚才有一些陌生的，就是说对这种影像的陌生性，因为我这个罗戏用了大量的到电影中间有19部电影都是有的罗戏，但是如果你第一次看它，你会发现它跟你的场景中间有可能搭建的话，我都觉得这个电影在这个层面之上，我觉得还是比较开放了，就是会把我们的互文关系拿掉了，因为这个影像跟到底已有的特殊作品有上下文关系。
I think I would add something to Etienne's question. I think Etienne is referring to the second episode of the film. It's really the suburb of Shanghai. It's 20 kilometers from here, from the downtown area. So it's really, I think it's very contemporary. It's like an underworld. It's in the summer night. The migrant workers are resting after the day of work. So it's really contemporary China, but it's omitted or it's being neglected by media and artists and so on. I think it's a really powerful combination that we have used the title Anti-Rural China. It's really the migrant workers are from the old houses. So now they are working in the factories near Shanghai. So it's really like the regime of contemporary China. It's old, it's nearly old, it's very modern, contemporary, everything, all the elements. So I think this the essence of the film. It's a cocktail of many things in contemporary China. So it's I hope the audience got it right. And for me, the first time I saw this episode, it's really quite traumatic for me because it's really a terrible situation. But when I'm watching it, it's really like an epic. It's like the really mythological kind of thing. It's I would say it's underworld. You know that it's modern, it's contemporary China, but it's based on that kind of thing. So, yeah.
No, but I think both with the light and with the mood of this it's an open air waiting room. Everyone is waiting. It's not anxious, but there's not purpose. And I felt like there was such a contrast when you enter the second chapter of a kind of, it's much more spectral. It seems much more haunted in a way than those elements which are actually acknowledging ancestrality or a haunting or a spectral ecology. But in those purposeful gestures, there doesn't seem to be this haunt. But in the second chapter, say, the movement of it's not unrest in the way when we say social unrest, but it's not restful or purposeful. And so that edge becomes quite, it gives you anxiety because we don't know what is there is no protocol for this space. Yeah. And I'm quite curious the movement through this also, as it does have, the camera is also haunting the space, I think. And so I'm curious about this because the camera in the second episode becomes almost a ghostly presence. And I'm just curious about, I'd love to hear what both of you would say about this, because the camera in the first instance has a kind of, it's recording a kind of devotional image. But in the second part, the camera is much more hauntological, I think.
是，第一个部分是在福建的客家地区拍摄的，非常具有中国代表性的一个古村落和改建的村落的样板。这个样板是大家查一下，叫培田古村，是中国乡村中间的古村落改造和改良的一个国家性的一个示范点。所以这是样本，是。然后第二个部分是关于是在我们的上海郊区和苏州接壤的，其实是大量的中国的农民生活在，并不在农村，也不在城市，而是在即将成为城市也还没有成为城市那一些建造工地上，那些街道都处于一种流动状态，是随时搭建的街道。所以那个地方，就像陆老师说的，那像一个幽灵的世界，那是像个地狱，但是它又是很现实的。那些人拿的工资比中国农民高得多了，很高收入，有些一个月拿了2万块钱的收入，但是一家人拖家带口，抱着小孩在那里找到一个铁皮的房子里面，找到一个临时安家的生活。是这种生活到底在追求什么呢？热的要死，所有的人都打着赤膊在外面，都像一群幽灵。我觉得那里就是有一种我情不自禁的方式去选择了这样的一种跟着，我特别想跟着一个人的背，就像我们自己跟随我们的父辈一样的，都是光着背在那一个城市临时的街道上游荡。当然也是一个商业、一个消费的场所，什么都有，都是送上门的，什么缝衣服的，我们会看到各种需要的产业都被配置在那里。然后到达神性的部分，其实您在那里已经看到了那一些东西，从电影的叙述上来说，都是为了为这一种可能的，我们要去寻找一种可能所是，让这种生命它在那里还是有个归属感的，那意思是上天堂。在中国很多农民的意义之上，不是上天堂，是上天朝，因为它上面也有官阶的，也一样的有的，所以在那一个看似是什么都，你看到的逻辑中间有很多看似是无力的东西，事实上它内部充满着张力。比如说，所有的逻辑的台本是大家都能够背出来，神性的部分都能背出来，所以你唱的人还没有唱，搭的人看的观众已经都知道你要唱什么，已经把你的台词给你背出来了。所以在这种场景里面，你会发现那种神性是共同制造的，那个仪式是我们要共同的让这种仪式发挥仪式的效力，也就是所谓的神性，是我们都在去共同去构筑的一个过程。那如果你问到电影为什么是这样的形式，我都觉得我一直在追求一种电影的，让电影剪辑本身是出生的， 所以这种电影其实我会在时间线上会摆上5、6年时间不会动它。大量的也有4个长篇电影，包括之前的《云豹3部》，这些都是只要我愿意去点动一个键，我可以叫它输出 .mp4 或者 MOV， 它就可以成为一部电影的过去。但是我一直没有去做这种工作，就在于这里面总是在寻找一种点。那么其实还是很感谢，为什么感谢这个展览呢？就是我这个作品也是因为我们的对话说了我们要完成一部新的作品，这个电影就是我已经剪了，一直丢在那里没有收拾的，就像我们面对这个中国的乡土问题一样的。这个时候我就在想，如何在扩张注意力，在电影自身能不能在自身的游走中间找到那影像，在至于我而言，它能够跃出我，就是在我之外去构建个人的界。我觉得这样才是一个导演或者是一个作者就完成的工作，就是我要把这个电影丢出去，它要被制作出来，它要自身要成为神，要从我这边游走出去，成为一种叙述。这个有点形而上啊。OK。
And of course, an artist would be like try to show his craftsmanship by summarizing the reality of China in one shot. So it's a very long shot. I think Chenyu must be very proud of that. It's long shot, and I think there are like 3 or 4 minutes of that. So it's really, for me, it's very powerful work because it's. I've been living in China for so many years and experiencing so much transformations. But this part of film is I think you used, Etienne used a very good word, ontological. Ontological. It means that it's more than that, but I can assemble with it with many other things. So basically, I think it's very essential in this documentary. And I would say that the film has offered 3 parts of the reality of China, and Chenyu tried to combine them. And so it's really it's a documentary of assemblage. If you want to know the reality of China, there are 3, not 1. So you have to combine them in order to get one. So it's, I think that's the, I would say it's the quite big contribution from Chenyu to the documentary making, I think. So it's always a big topic for the international cinematic world. What is the reality of China? What kind of cinematic technique could be used to describe the reality of China? Because we have gone through revolutions, reforms, and now we have the huge urbanization. So it's really, for me, it's not history anymore. It's ontology. It's about how I mix all those elements, and it will depend on how I mix them. If you want me to tell you what's the reality of China now, so I think it's really a good place to show this film. If we have international students in New York University here, this is a very good place to learn the history of modern China. Not from the books, but from this kind of documentary. It's really, I think, unique chance for them.
No, it's an incredibly powerful film. And if we, one day when we have a chance to visit and carry on this conversation, there are a number of powerful resonance with the film that Armin Linke made, who's based here in Berlin, about rural Indonesia and the urbanization and this interface as well. And I think there are a number of connections that cross into other parts of Asia as well. But I just want to acknowledge that I'm sure that there are a few folks in the live audience who have questions. I could speak with you both all afternoon, but maybe Iris, if you wanted to take a few questions before we draw to a conclusion from the live audience, if you could just say them back so that we also maybe know what they are, and the folks online can hear them as well.
谢谢两位老师。我的问题是跟这个就是影片的名字有关的，它的中文名是新乡土中国，然后英文名是 Anti-Rural China。这个并不是在我的理解，并不是直接翻译过来的嘛。然后这个新和这个 anti 的这个反中间是有一个张力的。然后刚刚陆老师讲到了一点点这个 Anti-Rural China，能不能够再就是 elaborate 一下？这个翻译有没有什么具体的考虑？然后在这个新和反之间是怎么样一个关系？
陆老师就是反对我用这个翻译的啊。陆老师讲一下这个他就是提供过很多翻译的可能性。那我的直观的感觉是，因为我要建立在这个比较通的这个像到中国的那个所谓的语境，我也有一个前后文的关系。但是这个新到底新在哪里？新在可能更多是重新构建一种越来越神性和不能说反科学，因为我们老是在这个功能学派在人类学的叙述里面，马林诺夫斯基到菲尔通他们这一条脉络都在强调可以科学的、客观的找到数据和方法分析社会问题，可以科学的去研究中国的土地问题等等这样的，包括生育制度等等这样的问题。他们认为那里面有个脉络，有可能的数据方法被科学化和被量化，可以被算出。但是这正好是我要反的，所以这个电影已经明确说了为什么它是反的。这个科学的，所谓科学的去面对社会研究的这个问题。
And I think Chenyu has been collaborating with many American anthropologists who are interested in Chinese the countryside. So it's always a struggling thing for him to whether to use those kind of methodology to express the reality of China. So in the past 3 years, I think he trying to get out of that. So it's kind of escape from both the Chinese tradition of anthropology and also from the American visual anthropology thing. So it's really a new start for him. So the name anti-rural, for me, it's a little bit confusing because it's not anti the rural itself. It's anti the anthropological tradition and also his own critique of self-critique, because he's following these paths for quite a few years. So he's struggling to have a new beginning. So it's really because the program has already been submitted, so we cannot change the title. It's really it's open to for discussion, I think. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Now, if I understood correctly, you said earlier that you didn't include very much language in this film because you wanted to create a different kind of experience where the images on screen spoke for themselves, sort of. I think this was a pretty interesting choice, and I'd like to hear more about it. So how do you think the film would have differed if you had chosen to take a different path, if you had decided to if you had decided to make language a greater component of the film?
我觉得要在我的叙述，在我的这种成文的叙述，包括汉语的这种叙述里面突出来，我要更愿意提供的是一种视觉的，能够产生连接的可能的那种无障碍的通道。所以这些电影就是有很精确的字幕可以做，都放弃掉了，就是有很多语言里面，但只是我们要把这种语言把它发展成一种正在运动的或空间的关系也可以。这个电影就用了很多形式，包括前20分钟我可能用尽了电影的用的那种简陋的特效的各种方法，但是我发现这个今天关于刚刚我们谈到这个电影的构成的时候， 两位策展人谈的一个词"萦绕"这个词，就是我应该用的一个词，跟它相应，也是我们长期以来做电影的时候所总结的一个概念，就是它有一种，在传统的一个是，我把那个词改过来叫灵分，屈原的一个词，它不是那个，本雅明的凌云，不是那个概念。灵分就是好像像一种神性的场景，你只要进入就会被陷入，而且你不是说被迫着要跟这一个场景一定要发生什么关系，你可以选择性避开，但你也可以选择性进入。这是这个电影我一直在做它的调试的时候，其实有大量的可以长可以短，没什么太的必要，就我只能站着一口气看完它，每天完成工作。我就强调我的身体跟这种影像中间能够建立那种恰当的尺度，所以这个东西应该也是所谓的这种出神的形式，在我跟屏幕之间要去完成了。所以我的时间线会反复的播放同一部电影，有的时候达到像这个电影播放应该达到100遍以上在电影上，像这个更长，我一直要看它，不断的看它。这东西就是没有任何东很朴素的一种剪辑，或者最简单的一种剪辑方法，但你一直都在寻找我的这种个人和这种要被溢出去的那个像造神一样的，我们给它讲可以叫作品，跟它的关系中间，我的尺度，我的排布的那种在剧场中间的位置在哪里？所以已经不再是要去动什么，或者说要去找什么样的，特别是这个素材这个概念。如果要讲相称的素材，我现在有3柜子都没处理，所以我也觉得很为这一种叙述一直都在找到一种方法来重新评论，就是关于要对你已拍摄的那一部分称作为素材的理解，都是我个人一直认为是有问题的。就是我们大量的人说，哦，我看看你的素材，看看这个电影要成为什么样，这是很可怕的一个叙述。我认为那一些被陈述之物都是像显灵一样的，像神一样的要到来的东西。所以我从不把我拍摄掉被剪辑掉的那些采访的人呢，认为他们是素材等等，从不这样去做。我认为他们有时候在这里出现，可能过10年以后在另外一部电影中间又会出现。我一直在这样去通用这样相同的这些面对这些对象来处理我们要去完成叙述的某样的一个剧场一样的。
I think the post-production period, I talked with Chenyu quite a few times, and it's my suggestion that we put the ritualistic drama, the rehearsal, and the ritual at the end of the film. And we believe that that would be enough for the audience to rehearse all the materials for themselves to like get the drama. So it's really not about like a dramatic build up of many elements. We try to help the audience to rehearse the materials for themselves, helped by the music, by all those performances. And that's, I think, the reason we choose not to use any sound or words. And I think it's for me, it's really, because I know Chenyu's background, he picked up all these materials from the interests of anthropological studies on Ruoxi, the drama itself. I believe this drama is very old. It's maybe more than 5,000 years old. So I would connect this kind of ritual to the so-called the animist period of humanity. That's 6,000 years ago. Now, almost all the anthropologists believe that all the races, all the humanities share the same heritage or tradition 6,000 years ago. It's animism. So this is not China anymore. I would say it's global. It's human. So I'm not sure whether Ruoxi is really that kind of a global heritage, but we believe that in front of this kind of performances, to use contemporary discourse to add something more, I think it's redundant. It's not necessary. And I also think that to talk a lot of things in the documentary is not good because in China, we have many discourses about the rural area, but even the Communist Party has its own discourse on the rural policies or about the future of the countryside. So I think it's already mixed water. So I think it's a good idea to avoid all those things. So that's the reason we do that.
Thank you very much both for elaborating on this. I think that it's a really wonderful transition back into the exhibition as a whole, because the way that you just talked about the role of your body as the filmmaker in the setting and the other ways of knowing through senses that are beyond linguistic speech and explication. I think that's exactly something that we try to tease out in collaboration with all of the artists present in the space there where you are. For example, in the diaspora work, where Duki and Pauline focused on or try to sort of sense and move with the ways of knowing of the plants in relation to the animals, creating the nutmeg, for example, beyond colonial trade relations of anthropocentric view. So what I really appreciate from what you were both just elaborating on in relation to our work in Ponds and on Ponds is this emphasis on other ways of knowing, which, as you said, for example, is enhanced through the role of music in the film. And so this very hypnotic experience of sitting with it is also is quite long. So to allow yourself to be taken with these visual and sonic experiences in relation to practice, ritual and lived practice. So I think that that's really very rich and very thought-provoking way of engaging with deep Chinese culture. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
I just one very last tiny remark that, you know, we hear many times about the tragedy of languages being lost through the globalization process, through displacement and whatnot. And we say, when we lose one of these languages, we're losing a whole world that was contained within that language. Yet we very rarely hear about when we lose a body language. And so what Mao Laoshe has done in the film is to show that all of the ways that the body inhabits the world are themselves also a body of knowledge, a set of relationships, an ecology of practices that can also be lost, and that losing a repertoire of body languages as we become untethered from purposeful movements is just as consequential as losing, say, a dialect, which we hear so much about. So I'm so grateful for both of you for the opportunity to premiere the film and to have this conversation. I realize we're a little bit over time. And so I would just, on behalf of Sophie and myself, love to thank you both, as well as the audience and the incredible team at the ICA who have been absolutely fantastic throughout this whole process. And I'll pass things over to Michelle for a last few things.
Thank you so much.
So much, Sophie and Etienne, for moderating the discussion and for organizing this exhibition with us. Thank you, Xinghua, for participating in the conversation. Of course, Mao Laoshe, for your contribution to the exhibition, as well as sharing your film with us. It was really a privilege and an honor. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today for our very last event of the season, as well as this 2-year artistic research program. We will be closing for the summer. However, we will open again with a new artistic research program focusing on other knowledges and other ways of knowing. We hope you'll join us.
believe.